Hello everyone, greetings of the day. Today we are going to study the design of columns part 1. Let me introduce myself. I am Professor Amar Chitore, Assistant Professor, Pimpri Chinchwad College of Engineering and Research, Rawet. So let's begin with the design of column part 1. In this, first of all, we are going to overview the basic terminologies related with columns. As we know that members in compression are called as columns and struts. The term column is reserved for the members which transfer the load to the ground, and the term strut is applied to compression members in any direction as those on truss. We can see this with the help of some diagrams. See here in this diagram. So these vertical members we are going to call as columns as they are transferring the load from top to the bottom soil or the ground. So that's why we are going to term these vertical members as columns, and we can see the next, that is the strut members. So the member of truss, so these inclined members or the members in any direction we call as the strut. Next, basic terminology. So as we can see another compression member in this figure, but this is not similar to the strut or the column which we see previously. Another example we can see here, over here, this is nothing but the wall. So this small member we are going to call as the pedestal, and this is what the wall. So both these are again the compression member representing the columns. So how we can define it? The column members whose height is not more than the 3 times the lateral dimension are called as the pedestal, while the term wall is used to the compression member whose breadth is more than 4 times the thickness of wall. Though it's representing the same, but the terminologies are different according to their dimensions. The next terminology is what we can going to study is the slenderness ratio. So this ratio is very important while designing the columns. So let's see the definition of slenderness ratio. So for reinforced rectangular columns, the slenderness ratio is defined as the ratio of effective length to its lateral dimension d. So in next slides, we are going to detail discuss about what is mean by the effective length of column. So for the better understanding of this, so we'll see in columns, especially in steel columns, the slenderness ratio is not similar to that of concrete. So we'll define the slenderness ratio in different manner. So in steel column, the slenderness ratio is generally expressed as the effective length to its least radius of gyration ratio. Then the modes of failures of column. Depending upon the slenderness ratio and the load coming on the structure, there are various modes of failures of column. In first, we can see the pure compression failure. Second, combined bending compression, combined bending and compression failure. And third is the failure by elastic instability. So we are going to categorize this failure with the help of one graph that we are going to call as the load versus slenderness ratio graph. So pure compression failure means only the particular column or the member is going to fail under axial load only. And for that, in this diagram, we can see the mode of failure 1. Mode of failure 1. So for this first mode of failure, the effective length by D means slenderness ratio is 12. So in pure compression, the member fails only under the axial load, for which the slenderness ratio is 12. In second case, the combined bending and compression, here the bending and compression of, of member takes place. So this is what the mode 2. For this, the slenderness ratio is 3030, and the final is the failure by elastic instability. For this, the slenderness ratio is more than 30, more than 30. We can see this failure through some diagrams. As we can see, the column failed under the pure compression. This column is failed under pure both compression as well as the bending. And third is the elastic failure, as we are not going to design any column for this failure where the slenderness ratio is more than 30. So I explained this concept just with the help of this bamboo tree. As we know that the length of bamboo tree is more as compared to its lateral dimension, and even though we are not applying the extra or large load, even under the small loads it is going to deflect and it is going to fail. While in the previous two cases, in case of pure compression and the combination of compression and bending, here materials both steel as well as concrete what we have is failed at its yielding, but this is not the case in case of this third failure. Next we are going to study, or next we are going to discuss about the classification of columns. Previously only what we discuss is the classification based upon the slenderness ratio. So the very first is we are going to categorize as the short column. So this is what the cross section of column, where horizontal distance on the x-axis represent the depth d and y represent the width b. So for the categorization of short column, or to define the short column, IS 456-2000 has given already the clause 25.1.2, the short and slender compression member. So according to the IS code, a compression member may be considered as short when both slenderness ratios, that is Lex by D or Ley by B, are less than 12. So less than 12, this is very important phenomena. Slenderness ratio in both cases, the slenderness ratio must be less than 12. So this is very important. Okay, next we need to know about the terminologies related to this. What is mean by Lex? What is mean by Ley? So Lex is the effective length in respect of major axis. Capital D is the depth in respect of major axis. Ley is the effective length in respect of minor axis. And small v, width of the member. It shall be otherwise considered, means if this ratio is greater than 12, then we will consider the particular column member as the slender column member. So less than 12 short, and greater than 12 slender compression member. Then classification based upon the support condition to the column, we are going to categorize as braced and unbraced columns. Braced column means the lateral supports are provided to take the lateral loads whichever is coming on the columns. This we can understood with the help of diagrams. So see here I have taken the example of steel column. So this vertical member is the steel column, and whatever lateral loads coming on the structure is going to sustain by these bracings. So This column is supported by bracing. Lateral loads, whatever coming on the column is going to take by this lateral support. So that's why we are going to call this as the braced column. Another day-to-day life example for the braced column is, as everyone, all of you know this is what the elevated water storage tank. In case of elevated water storage tank also, the vertical members are connected by these horizontal members of beam. So this is nothing but the lateral support to these columns, and lateral load is going to take by these lateral support. Next, we have unbraced columns. So in unbraced columns, we have no lateral support to take the lateral loads. So this we can understood by the given diagram. So in this diagram, we have the plan. In this plan, 1, 2, 3, 4 columns, 4 plus 4, 8 columns are there. So as we can see here, in x direction, we have this column 1 and 2, and in x direction we provided this shear wall. Means these columns, suppose this we are going to call as a column 1 and column 2. So column 1 and 2 is laterally supported in x direction because of the shear wall. But if we consider these vertical columns, column 3, column 4 and column 5, so column 3, 4, 5, they are in y direction. So the columns in x direction 1 and 2 is laterally supported, where the column 1, 3, 4, 5 in columns in y direction, they are unbraced column, or they are not laterally supported in y direction. Next, we are going to study about the unsupported and effective high length. Actually, it's a term height in case of columns. So what is the basic difference between the actual length of columns and the effective length of the column? So this is again taken from the IS 456 2000, and these diagrams itself clear the concept related with the unsupported and effective length of column. As we can see here, the various cases were presented in this diagram. So total 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 7 cases were considered. Here we consider this as the column were supported at top and bottom. So this is for the unsupported length of the column. So unsupported length of the column is different from the effective length. How it is different, that we'll see. So if the column is fixed at both the ends, so here fixed support is provided, here also fixed support is provided. If the column is fixed at both ends, the effective length, so the unsupported length is L everywhere, but the effective length for this case where both ends are fixed is 0.65. In second case, one end is fixed, another end is hinged, the effective length is 0.8. Similarly, if the both ends are hinged, the effective length is 1. And this is the remaining cases. So detailed explanation for the effective length of isolated columns is given in the table 24 of IS 456 2000. So we will directly take the reference of table 24 to find out the unsupported and effective length of columns for any case. Then we can, the IS code has given the limit to the slenderness ratio, as we see in the previous slide, that the depending upon the failure of column, they are going to divide into 3 types. So to merge the given column in that 3 types, we must follow the slenderness ratio. So the slenderness ratio limit is given by the IS code in the clause 25.3. So according to that clause 25.3.1, the unsupported length between the restraints shall not exceed the 60 times the least lateral dimension of the column. It also given in the clause 25.3.2, if any given plan one end of the column is unrestrained, its unsupported length shall not exceed the 100 b square by d. Means there are two cases they have given for the slenderness ratio. One is the unsupported length between the restraints, means both ends are fixed, where in that case slenderness ratio should not exceed 60 times the least dimension, and this is the case for the cantilever. This is the case for cantilever beam. Sorry, this is the case for cantilever column. Here one end is not restrained. So for cantilever columns, the slenderness ratio we can calculate it by this 100 d square by d. When we consider the cross section, so one dimension is b and another dimension is d. So this is what the limit we must consider while designing the column. So we can directly see what is the, suppose this is our column in elevation and this is the plan of the column in cross section. So these are the dimensions we have, capital D and small b. So this we are going to consider. So for calculating the columns for supported at both the ends, so suppose here the least dimension is b, 60 times b should not be the slenderness ratio, and for cantilever column 100 v square by d.